And we are living now in a very transformational time in our history, because the big housing is one of the key pillars that our president has identified, and we have to do everything we can to see that we support. Now, in 2008, the Kibaki government came up with Vision 2030, and they made a broad statement of intent that they would like Kenya to be a middle-income economy, affording a reasonable quality of life to its population by the year 2030. Excellent. What they didn't tell, then they also, in unveiling that, showed us all the flagship projects and the things that would be done to get Kenya to reach 2030. What they didn't tell us is what you and I have to do to help this country get to 2030. And today, I mean, I believe I'm reasonably well schooled, but I really have no idea what my contribution to Vision 2030 is. And I think these projects that the current president has put in place perhaps give us a bit of greater clarity in terms of how we can get to 2030. So what we've done in the Chamber of Commerce is, again, when the Kenyatta government came up with a Big Four agenda, they said that these are the 4 pillars: manufacturing, affordable housing, universal health care, and food security. So as a chamber, in partnership with Countable, which is an American organization, we said, let's start a series of dialogue to really unbundle what the Big Four has to offer for us and the opportunities that exist for the business community. So my 5-minute presentation, I hope I'll try and keep it to 5 minutes, will just focus on what we see as the opportunities, what our concerns are, and perhaps 1 or 2 recommendations. So we've had three dialogue sessions so far. We had one on manufacturing, one on housing, where we had a keynote speaker being Charles Hinga, and we've had one we've had manufacturing, housing, and healthcare. We haven't done food security because, there's been a bit of disruption in the Ministry of Agriculture, so we are waiting to do that early next year. In partnership with Karatina University, JKU and Countable, we hope to come up with a publication early next year that will contain opportunities and almost a guidebook in terms of for the business community to know how they can access opportunities in affordable housing, in this housing pillar. What are the opportunities that I see? One is the Kenya Mortgage Refinancing Company will offer an alternative form of financing. I think we all agree that if you're relying on going to housing finance, SNL, KCB, and Barclays Bank for a mortgage, maybe if we have 24,000 mortgages, we might have another 24,000 qualify, and that's it. It's going to be nowhere near the 500,000 that we are talking about. So I think that was quite a clever way that it was packaged. The second opportunity has been talked about before: suppliers of building materials, transporters, suppliers of new technology in housing. There's a huge opportunity out there, and as a head of the Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to encourage as many of you to think outside the box. Look for partnerships with people and organizations that offer alternatives to the current building materials and the whole build environment realm. We also see a huge opportunity in the provision of credit and trade financing, building and civil works, as I've talked about, project management. Project management is a whole sphere of learning that many people have not focused on. I mean, if they are going to get anywhere near the numbers that Zioka Waita has talked to us about, then they have to have a whole cadre of people who are experts in project management. Quantity surveying, construction, real estate and property management will go to a whole new level. I mean, the number of houses, today we are dealing with the houses that we have. But even if we get 100,000, which is 20% of what they envisage, think of the opportunities for you in the Residents Association. Actually, I cannot think of any association that plays a bigger role in helping us attain Vision 2030 than the Kenya Association of Residents Association. Because the broad statement that was made is a middle-income economy affording people a reasonable quality of life. I mean, who more than you guys? And of course, and us in the chamber. We have to partner to do that. Consultancy, architecture, the whole business planning opportunity. There will be opportunities in employment. I mean, we need builders, we need plumbers, we need QSs, we need a whole realm of professionals and non-professionals, people with artisan training from our TVET programs. Those are just some of the few opportunities that we see coming up with this. But having talked about the opportunities, of course, there will be opportunities in joint venturing and partnership with the participants in this industry. The concerns that we have, Felix has talked about corruption. I won't belabor the point. But it's easy to talk about doing business in Kenya, but it's really foolhardy to do it without considering the fact that corruption and bureaucracy and red tape very many times stand in the way of some of the best laid out plans. We are also very concerned about the rate of return on investment. I'm also concerned about the numbers. I think I asked Mr. White a question. And really, if I was an advisor of President Kenyatta, I would work my numbers backwards to get a figure that I would go home with and say, fine, out of the 500,000 that would be built, because you know politics is politics. Whoever takes over from him in 2022, any houses built from 2023, will that be his credit or somebody else's? They'll completely trash the fact that he is on who did. I mean, we forget even what was done for us in education in the 90s, what the Kibaki government did the other year. So I think for me, if I was a government advisor, I would actually think that they need to come up with a figure that we can hold them accountable to. It shouldn't be a moving target. I mean, I did the numbers in New York recently, and I shared it with some of the government people that I was with, Monica Juma and Jem Muturi and others, and I said, if they're going to achieve 500,000 houses, then really they need to build 11,111 houses per month to completion every month until the next election, and hand over keys for 11,111 houses. Is that achievable? It's a tall order. But then they can put in place the plans. They can lay the framework to make that a reality. But then I think we need to figure out how we can actually persuade government to come up with a number for which we can hold them accountable. We are also concerned about the increasingly burdensome tax regime that we have in the country. I mean, you will agree with me that our tax regime today is one of the highest in the world. So really, that also stands in the way of people being able to realize their aspirations. We are also concerned about one thing that is almost at cross purposes. One is we are in a very stringent credit regime. The Central Bank of Kenya today, as a regulator of financial institutions, are very strict about credit. You know that today, if your debt is in default for 3 months, the bank has to start making arrangements to provide 100%. So we have that, and at the same time, on I think it's month 2, they must take your name to the credit reference company, and I'm chairman of Credit Info, so I have a good idea about that. So we have that on the one hand, a very stringent credit regime, and on the other hand, we have a late payment culture. And the Chamber of Commerce, this year, our advocacy agenda number 1 is on late payments. And we did a research before we made that our advocacy agenda number 1. Many of you may think that late payments is a problem of central government, but it is much bigger than that. In Kenya, late payment culture is with the national government, is with the county governments, is with large corporates, is with SMEs, is even with civil society. Basically, it's a cultural issue now. It's almost at a point where we can say Kenyans are developing a culture where people pay when they feel like. Do you agree with me or not? Do you relate to that statement? So on the one hand, people pay you as and when they feel. And on the other hand, the central bank is saying if you're 60 days late, the bank must provide 100%. So what is my concern? My concern is that by the time this plan is being laid out, 90% of Kenyans might have fallen off credit-worthy category. So we really need to look at the payment culture. We really need to look at our credit regime to see that the two of them are concurrent and make it possible for people to participate. Red tape and bureaucracy, population relocation. You see, Kenyans are highly litigious, unlike Ethiopia, and we've traveled to Ethiopia, we've been to many other countries. You know, in Ethiopia, you know, the constitution we put in 2010, many of us are happy, but then there are very many aspects of it that make it very difficult to move forward. I remember one day we were sitting at the Huduma Center, and I can't remember what some of the bureaucrats did, and the head of state got really upset and he fired them. And when he was still at the function, some guys ran to the High Court and they got an injunction stopping the head of state's firing. Same guys. That happens only in Kenya. So I think we have a problem. We have to agree that, you know, you might say you want to build 100,000 houses in Huruma, and then you have 10 guys who go to court and stop the process for 2 years. So we've got to really factor in the fact that we are a highly litigious society that was brought about by the new constitutional dispensation that we have. That will pose challenges in relocation of populations. There's also the whole issue of time taken to deliver projects, approvals. I talked about red tape, things like NEMA and the stringent requirements of NEMA. As you know, Kenya is a signatory of the French Accord on environment, so there's very many things that we must comply to as per that protocol. And again, you see, we are not compliant as a country to many of the provisions that we signed on to in Paris, the Paris Accord 3 years ago. There are many things we are not complying with. But then we've continuously been asking for an extension. So there will be a time in life when we will be told no more extensions and you've got to comply. When that happens again, there's a likelihood of it reducing the deployment possibility. Our recommendations, we recommend that there be a reduction in VAT and most taxes for construction materials. We also would like to recommend that, again, as a member of the board of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, 70% of our capital markets are in the hands of foreign owners. And in Kenya, we have a very new and a very far-reaching Cap 486 Companies Act that can allow for one person to own a company. It can even be one foreign person, and we allow for 100% repatriation of profits. You don't need to have a local partner. In the Chamber of Commerce, we are recommending that the government should consider a framework where all foreign participants in this Big Four agenda should take on local partners. Otherwise, what's going to happen? In the capital markets, we have 70% foreign ownership. In the 500,000 houses, I would hate to see 900,000 of them, 90% of them being built by foreigners. And those of us getting keys there will just be debtors and spending the rest of our lives paying slowly for those. We need to look at a tax legislation that exempts infrastructure bonds from taxation. That will make it easier for government to raise money for these projects. And we'd also like to recommend that the government really needs to reconsider the tax regime. So we need to have a less burdensome tax regime to give people more disposable income in order for them to enjoy these 500,000 new homes that they will be given if and when they are completed. My final recommendation, again, I don't want to belabor the point, is I really would like the government to work their figures and their numbers afresh, to tell us a number that they will deliver by 2022, even if it's 100,000. I think as Kenyans, we will have taken a very big step forward. And we will be doing 5 times more houses than the total number of mortgages that are available in the market today. But in conclusion, let me say, I want to commend our government for this great vision of really addressing the way people live. But having said that, I want to emphasize that when you introduce a welfare program in a capitalistic environment, the disruption will have a lot of consequences. But I think it's consequences that we are willing to pay as a people if it means our people live in better homes. Thank you very much.